Now, fortunately, the threshold has been reduced to 177,000 for constitutional change.
Of course, was a few moments from a meeting in Airdrie, Alberta, from the Alberta Prosperity Project. Look at the numbers. We had Jeff Rath on the show this week to talk about what's going on. The show is not about that today, but I just wanted to start off the show today with that. And we'll be back in a few mere moments here with some good news.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. You know, we were going to do the show today on the Lloyd Axworthy interview with CBC and how Lloyd Axworthy, former External Affairs Minister, Foreign Affairs, I can't remember during those years if it was Foreign Affairs or External Affairs, they kept changing the title. And under Jean Chrétien, Lloyd Axworthy was a left-winger in the Chrétien cabinet. And he was always talking about soft power. And he hated the idea of Canada being a military power. So we're going to talk about that later and how Lloyd Axworthy represents the great divide in the Liberal Party. However, we're always talking about the bad news here. I thought we'd talk about the good news because there's lots of good things happening. And this is because we finally have a chance to expose the negligence of the federal government. The federal government is not looking after people under the vaccine injury program at all. And here's Kyle Kemper talking about it right here. The reaction to a COVID-19 vaccine left Stephen dead in his prime. The situation is so bad that global news is acknowledging it. They try to propagandize and minimize the injuries, but the story tells a different tale. So we're going to be watching some of those stories here. And we'll get to Lloyd Axworthy later. But, as I said at the beginning, we were going to talk about Lloyd Axworthy at the top. But don't you think it's time for a little bit of good news here in terms of how government negligence is being absolutely exposed. And this is the Vaccine Injury Support Program, which we're talking about. And so I want to congratulate Global News for taking the lead on this, because we're always criticizing the mainstream media. We're always saying the mainstream media does a lousy job of covering these stories. And when they do the job correctly, I think we need to identify that. And we're going to get to this one too. We'll get to those videos in a minute, but I want to highlight this as well, because this is huge news as well. If you were watching the freezing of bank accounts during the Freedom Convoy. Now that was an absolute outrage. And I'm going to read that slide in a minute, but the judge has ordered, this is an Ontario judge, has ordered the RCMP and the Toronto Dominion Bank to release its records in Freedom Convoy bank freeze case. And the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom is taking the lead on this. And I really want to congratulate them for doing that. And if you can't, I'm going to read this to you now, because this is incredible news. And this is another piece of good news before we get to the vaccine injury program that is failing people, but at least is being exposed now. The court compels RCMP and TD Bank to hand over records relating to freezing of peaceful protesters' bank accounts. At the time, if you were one of the people affected by this, and I know people who were, I wasn't because I don't donate to any political causes if I report on them. Obviously, I had my sympathies, and you all know where those sympathies were lying with. But the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom posted the other day, the RCMP Police and TD Bank Canada have been ordered to produce records relating to the freezing of Mr. Evan Blackman's bank accounts during the 2022 Freedom Convoy protest. This really marks a significant step in what is believed to be the first criminal case in Canada involving a proposed charter application based on the freezing of personal bank accounts under the Emergencies Act. Now, you recall, we all said at the time, is this even legal for Chrystia Freeland or the Prime Minister to freeze bank accounts? And of course, the answer was no. It was not ostensibly, we're learning, legal. A judge already has found this unconstitutional. This really marks a significant thing. The freezing of Mr. Blackman's bank accounts was an extreme overreach on the part of the police and the federal government, says constitutional lawyer. Read the full story here. I encourage you to go to this post from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms and find out what's going on here, because this is dynamite in terms of pushing back on illegality from the Liberal government. In those days, it was headed by Justin Trudeau. Today, it's the same Liberal government is headed by, of course, Mark Carney. So let us have a look at some of this material that is absolutely astounding. And that's the only way I can describe this. Because, and once again, this is a series produced by Global News. And I want to highlight who these people are, because Andrew McIntosh and Carolyn Jarvis are working on this story. And we'll have that. The stories we're looking at, I believe, are mainly Carolyn Jarvis. But watch what's possible when journalists actually seek the truth and not just seek to confirm government talking points. Because you know what's going on here with this vaccine injury program. They don't want to process cases, because the fewer cases they process, the government can say, hey, there's no problem here. Nobody is being served by the program. So obviously nobody out there has a problem. We've got a handful of cases. And yes, we know the vaccine was safe and effective, except for some people it wasn't. And I will elaborate on that in a minute.
I looked this morning, it still says I'm in the application phase.
Kayla Pollock has been waiting 3 years for her case to be assessed by the Vaccine Injury Support Program.
I haven't gotten even a message back saying we're looking at your file.
She is one of more than 1,700 injured people who are still in the queue.
I don't think they've even read my claim.
Kayla has a condition called transverse myelitis, a spinal cord disorder which has been documented after COVID vaccination.
I can't move my hand.
It was only days after her third shot the symptoms started. The searing pain followed a few weeks later.
From about here down, nothing moves and nothing works.
The Vaccine Injury Support Program, or VISP, is run by a private company called Oxaro. It bid on the lucrative government contract promising speedy response times. But emails to the injured say, due to an unexpectedly high volume of claims, VISP will respond
quarterly.
The forecast for that volume of claims was flawed from the start. The Public Health Agency of Canada, which oversees the program, estimated an average of 40 claims a year, with the potential for more in the first few years. That estimate was bumped up to 400 valid claims a year in the contract with Oxaro, but it was still off. Today, more than 3,000 people have applied in less than 4 years. Only 219 have been approved.
I absolutely believe that the program is a sham.
Jasmine Dea is a personal injury lawyer whose clients are battling the program.
These people have not, in some cases, had an income for years, and they're still waiting on a decision.
Former Oxaro workers say the infrastructure in place was not equipped to handle the volume, and the company was building the program as they went.
That's better.
In the absence of any help from VISP, Kayla relies on donations and disability support from the Ontario government. And she had to give primary custody of her son to his dad, with whom she used to share parenting.
I lost my job, my son, my health. I lost everything. And I'm the one paying for all that.
In Kayla's dreams, she still walks. And then she wakes up to a fight that never ends.
It's been hell. It's been a nightmare.
In an emailed response, Oxaro says it has adapted the program, its processes, procedures, and staffing to face the challenges of receiving substantially more applications than originally planned. It says its timelines also depend on the nature and complexity of a claim, and it's working with the Public Health Agency of Canada so that everyone is treated fairly. Carolyn Jarvis, Global News.
Bravo, Carolyn Jarvis and Global News for putting that report together. And there's more to follow. In fact, there's better to follow. I'll just put that. I'll put that slide up, and there they are: Andrew McIntosh and Carolyn Jarvis. Couldn't find that earlier, but these are the two investigative reporters for Global News who have produced this series, and I've got a little more to show you on this. But here's Kayla before and after. Now look at this post. I mean, this is heartbreaking, and I'll tell you, it's heartbreaking for me personally. Now, after I show you the next clip, which I found very difficult to watch. But here's Kayla Pollock on X saying, the COVID shot took more than my legs. Now I watch my son, my partner swimming and enjoying the summer, and I have to keep on a smile and pretend I'm not dying inside, wishing I could swim one last time. If only I'd known. Now, we are doing this today, folks, to test the limits of suppression and censorship on this media outlet, on this social media outlet, because apparently now we can talk about injury as a result of the vax. And the Vaccine Injury Support Program is an acknowledgement from the government that, yes, for some people anyway, it wasn't safe and effective. But you look at that picture of this woman before, lifting weights, probably doing yoga, probably running, physically fit as any person I know today. Look at her today. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not just a tragedy. That is a travesty of government negligence. And to make matters worse, to compound the negligence, their response to it has been equally negligent. If I sound a little passionate about this, it's because I've lost 2 family members to what I believe is a result of vaccine injury. I probably can't elaborate, but these are very close family members. And I know several members who I used to work with in the armed forces, my age and younger, my age a little older, who have also been injured to the point of not being here anymore as a result of the vax. And I hear about these cases all the time. So I'm going to watch this, and it's difficult for me to watch this because this is very personal for me, extremely personal. I wonder sometimes how I have been affected by this safe and effective vaccine.
I didn't feel like I was there to work. I felt like I was there to kind of hang out and socialize.
This former employee, whose identity we have agreed to protect for fear of repercussions, says working at the Vaccine Injury Support Program felt like high school.
There was definitely no shortage of phones out, watching YouTube. The slushy machine was cool. Ping pong was definitely a regular thing.
The federal government hired a company called Oxaro to run the program and paid them $50.6 million. Global News spoke with more than a dozen current and former Oxaro employees, whose comments included working there was a joke, with drinking Fridays, inexperienced underpaid staff who weren't properly trained.
I don't think anyone actually understood the severity or the relevance of the program that was being contracted to the firm.
The Vaccine Injury Support Program, or VISP, was created to provide financial support to people who are seriously and permanently injured by vaccines. People like Ross Whiteman.
They're just doing a piss poor job of supporting the vulnerable.
A former commercial pilot and realtor, Ross was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome after receiving his COVID vaccine, a rare but recognized side effect. His claim was among the first to be approved by VISP. And yet 4 years later, every day is a fight against his body and the program.
At the moment, I'm probably out about $25,000.
In its policy for VISP, the Public Health Agency of Canada said the injured will have fair and timely support. But Ross Whiteman waited nearly a year and a half while unable to work for a full injury payout, 3 more months for income replacement, and still regularly battles the program for his medical expenses.
It could take a month. It could take 12 months.
Some former workers say there was no sense of urgency.
There was an amount of work you were expected to finish.
Every day.
And you weren't hitting those targets.
No, probably well below.
What was lost in the program were the people.
They were merely names on paper, nothing more than that.
Today, Ross Whiteman is on his 7th case manager. He's lost his health, his savings, and perhaps worst of all, he's lost hope.
We're such a small group of people, I just feel like it's on to the next one.
In a statement, Oxaro said this is a new program, and it aims to provide a process that ensures all cases are treated fairly and with the same care, respect, and due diligence. It says its timelines depend on each case's nature and complexity. Carolyn Jarvis, Global News.
Once again, thank you, Carolyn Jarvis and Global News, for an excellent report. Watching this, I don't know, and I didn't know whether to cry or fly into a rage, because this is not adding insult to injury. When you have, these aren't even bureaucrats. These are people hired, contracted out to do a job this important, and they don't even take it seriously. This is adding injury to injury. And that's what is so infuriating about this. So these yo-yos sit around drinking on Fridays. They don't even, I'm sure they don't even wait till the end of the day, drinking Fridays. They play ping pong. They have a slushy machine, and they generally sit around looking at their iPhones. This is beyond outrageous. And I invite your comments on this, and I will look at them after we finish looking at these videos, because this to me is emblematic of how the federal government doesn't give a damn about the vaccine injured, doesn't care to acknowledge, or at least will do so in a remote way as possible, and will deliver services as minimal as possible. And why? Because they don't want to admit there was ever any problem with this vax. They don't want to admit any kind of responsibility. So if they can come up with saying, hey, we only had 45 cases, guess there was no crisis here. That's what's going on. This is politics at its worst, politics at its most raw, politics at its most vicious. And that is why I watch this and I say it is difficult to stomach. The negligence, the bad attitude, and the complete dismissal of this government to these people, of these people. Let's watch some more. because I think this is something. And once again, though, the fact that this is being exposed is the good news, because we've known this for years, haven't we? You and I, you viewers and I, we know people affected like this. We've written about them. Well, I have. You've told me about them. You've written to me about people you know. I've done stories about them. But there was very little acknowledgement from, first of all, the government or by the mainstream media. And thank God that seems to be changing right now. So if it's changing, it's because we're pushing back people. It's because we're demanding truth. We're demanding justice. We're demanding that they can't look the other way and pretend nothing going on here, folks. Let's watch another.
As many of you may now be aware, Global News has just recently published a piece about what happened to the millions of dollars that were supposed to go to the vaccine injured. Some of the things that were discovered were things such as drinking Fridays, ping pong playing, and slushy machines that were always in use. That is what your tax dollars did. Our tax dollars went to that type of thing instead of helping people who are actually vaccine injured, such as myself and many of my friends. Some of us weren't so lucky, and our children even passed away. Some of my friends are paralyzed. Some of my friends have neurological disorders. Many of my friends you will know. And many of the faces that you will see on this news program are just some of the many, many people that have helped create this story. Now, it is important to note that we have already heard this story. Rebel News went through and told this story months ago. Others have exposed this type of thing. But hopefully now that some other people, maybe on the liberal side, are able to see our story, maybe something will be done. In the meantime, there are still lots of us, such as myself, that are now fighting to survive for ourselves. We have literally no money and disabilities that would make most people just want to give up and die. In fact, I was offered medical assistance in dying in Canada 3 times because of my vaccine injury. I'd really appreciate it if you could donate to www.opkayla.ca. Please find the link in the description. Follow for more information. My story will be out tonight. You can also find it on Global News' YouTube channel. Watch the entire series. Click on the link. Pass it on. It could save a life.
Yes, pass it on. And I just want to share a few of your comments at this point here. Lecomte, I know a nurse that got really sick after the vaccine, could not walk for a while. Well, with Kayla's case, she's not walking at all. It didn't. Time to deliver the promised consequences. I love this comment from Susie. Horrendous. Yes, it is. James Weist, just wait. This is the tip of the iceberg, James. You bet it is. You bet it is. I'll say it this time. Please share this broadcast with your friends and family. We're just a little over halfway through. But let's beat the suppression, because there are people out there who still don't want you or the public to know about how bad it is. And if it is the tip of the iceberg, James, we need to keep digging, and we need to keep showing how low that iceberg is. Krayden harass. I got 3 shots. Now I have pericarditis, and I have been hospitalized due to heart issues. So that's a fact. We'll show some more of these. But we have one more video to show in this block.
Hey, everybody. So Global News has just put out a multi-part series about VISP, the Vaccine Injury Support Program. And for anyone who didn't know what's going on over there at that joke facility, I hope you got to learn something. And I hope you've learned something new to see what myself and so many others are going through. For that, I'm very grateful. Sean was included in this series, and for that, I'm grateful. However, for me and so many others, this is old news. we know what VISP has been all about. I know, and a lot of others know, because it's pretty obvious. I appealed their decision 2 years ago, and they haven't made a decision. So that should be pretty obvious to most. But there are people out there like Tamara Ugalini, a very good friend of mine, who has interviewed me 264 times about Sean, who has been talking about this for a long time, years. For years she's been talking about this. And aren't we still ignoring the elephant in the room? People like Viva Frey has interviewed me. People like Derek Sloan, Greg Wycliffe, Jason Levine, and there's others. And
Yes, and I'm certainly aware of the story. Vicky Lindsay says, don't ever let them do this again. Well, Vicky, we work together. And if we resolve to resist, and I'm not just mouthing a slogan, if we resolve to resist this kind of government negligence, government criminality, then perhaps we won't let them do it again. But when you listen to Kayla's remarks, did you note how she said, instead of trying to help her, the government said, why not try MAID, medical assistance in dying? Why not try the MAID program so you can self-delete? Just give up. And when people accept that, then suddenly they become just a statistic, but not even a statistic about the vaccine injury. They become a statistic about people who have embraced medical assistance in dying. And for some reason, the federal government seems to be very proud of its MAID program. It's so proud of it, it wants to keep expanding the parameters of the MAID program until other people, such as the mentally ill, such as alcoholics or drug addicts, even children, will be included. Because that's how this government views people who are expendable. You just get rid of them. You know, that sounds like a lot of other regimes, both today and yesteryear, that viewed human beings as expendable if their health failed or if they didn't live up to the standards or accept perhaps the narrative of the government, then they were expendable. Now, I find this absolutely horrendous, as one of our viewers pointed out a few minutes ago. Who's the MP for this group? Yeah. And I just want to spend a few minutes looking at this. Take care, Rob. Genghis Tron. Mike McKenzie. Mike, you don't know, I'm on the verge of tears when I read this. God bless you, David, for standing up for all of us. I've done that, and I've watched these broadcasts sometimes get thrown to the ground because we're talking about issues that some people don't want us to talk about. But thank you, Mike, for saying that. My sister and her son got 5 shots. Criminal. Now, this is eliciting the kind of response I would have expected from the good people who view this show, who watch this show. Because you knew this before global news knew it. You knew this before the government even wanted to admit there was any issue here. And I have to speak deliberately vague at times. And I like this. They used mind control. That's why they stayed in lines while people were dropping. Yeah, incredible. We tried to tell you, but the censorship got in the way. James, thank you again for saying that. And it's worth just spending a few minutes looking at these comments because it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because on the one hand, it's great that it's being exposed. We're finally getting some justice, at least in terms of exposure. But we're not getting any justice from the federal government. They're still in denial, big time. They're still in delusion. They live in delusion. They envelop themselves in delusion because this is all about politics. You know, I have to laugh because you remember the other day, I showed you the old clip from Justin Trudeau invoking the Emergencies Act on February 14th, 2022. It was 3 years ago. I think I accidentally said it 2 years ago when I did that broadcast. Yeah, and I remember where I was that day. I was downtown Ottawa with the Freedom Convoy. And you saw the cabinet minister standing behind him in lockstep, looking like they were standing actually in a firing line. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the $10, Big D. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for continually talking about this. I think most would rather forget or have us forget to avoid accountability. God bless David. Thank you. Thank you for the $10. Thank you for that super chat. Appreciate that so much. That is much, much appreciated. I just want to have a look at that a few more times. Anyway, I was telling you about the Freedom Convoy having the full force of the police brought down upon their heads, literally on their heads. And I saw people assaulted by the police for peacefully protesting. The government did not want you to know there was an issue here. They were pushing ahead with their WEF globalist agenda, and we were supposed to accept this and be in lockstep. But I keep saying, this is great news. Now we know the government can't run from the truth anymore. This is good news. I have to keep saying that because you know what happens? Wow. Thank you, Taylor May. $50 super chat. That is just absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Watch Nurse Becca. She has been fighting this. Yeah. There's been a lot of us fighting this. And it's nice to see finally the truth emerge from beyond the shadows. And that's what this is all about. And here we are again. None Canadian. Every government agency, every layer of government in Canada broke the Nuremberg Code and are due for tribunals. Wouldn't argue with that. I wouldn't argue with that at all. And once again, thank you for the support you're showing today because it's, and I just want to go through a few more of these because, and these are people who have suffered, still have heat issues, hard to do any activity without a walker. Just increase, I think she's saying increases my heart. Just in case my heart gives out. My heart goes out to all of you. And believe me, I have been personally affected by the consequences of this pandemic in terms of loved ones, friends, and acquaintances being injured to the point of not being here anymore. Sheridan Forbes, sadly, no one will be held accountable. It's very possible, Sheridan. But it's time the public held the government accountable. And it's time the government acknowledge the extent of this travesty. If this doesn't go to tribunals, they will try it again. Very possible. And this is why, my friends, we have to take Mark Carney, Prime Minister Mark Carney, at his word when he says he's prepared to use emergency powers, such as the Emergency Act, to push through his agenda. I have to say this at least 5 times a week because it's necessary to say that. Let's not forget what Mark Carney told a crowd of, 50 to 100 people in Kelowna. I don't know if he intended, if or even noticed there was a local media person there, but that's what he said. And he's very serious about this. I almost hate. Okay, Big D, $10. Oh, we have another one. Dave B, $20. Keep up the fight. God bless. Thank you. Thank you so much. You people are wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And and there are mornings I wake up and I think, is it worth it talking about the truth like this? Is it worth it? Am I going to be able to keep doing it? And it's support like that. It's people like you who convince me to keep doing this, because I think it's very, very important. Now, I'm almost hesitant to move on to the next story, but that's part of the program today. And this is also a good news story. Just like the exposure of this negligence is a good news story, so is this. The Liberal Party is at a great divide. Now, you might not have heard me at the very beginning of the show, because we had some momentary technical problems with the sound. But I mentioned the fact that initially I was going to lead with the Lloyd Axworthy story. And unfortunately, a lot of people out there on YouTube don't understand the significance of Lloyd Axworthy criticizing Mark Carney. First of all, Lloyd Axworthy used to be the External Affairs Minister. He was a top cabinet minister in the Jean Chrétien government. He was also on the left of the Liberal Party. He was the guy that used to talk about soft power all the time. Remember that? As opposed to what? Hard power? Actually, as opposed to military strength. He wanted soft power, meaning you somehow negotiate yourself out of tight spots with words and with foreign loans or or money or whatever it is, but don't have a strong military. And that's what Lloyd Axworthy used to talk about. I met him on several occasions, was at committee meetings where he testified. And of course, Lloyd Axworthy was on the left of the Liberal Party. Now he's criticizing Mark Carney for being too much of a bootlicker. Calls him the child king. Says he's too much in the pocket of Donald Trump. Well, let's listen to a bit of this interview, because the significance of this is that the Liberal Party is being divided. It's being separated at, if you will, the center. And there's now a vast cleavage between the Mark Carney forces and whatever Lloyd Axworthy still represents as the progressive liberal wing of the party. The joke, of course, is Mark Carney is part of that liberal progressive wing, but he's pretending to be something else right now. He's pretending to be something else. And what he actually is, though, is a corporatist. And he's espousing the same ideas that fascism did. So it's almost like we've got the extreme right and the extreme left in the Liberal Party. And what do they really agree on? Controlling you. Let's listen to Lloyd Axworthy for a couple of minutes here.
Prime Minister Mark Carney's approach is drawing condemnation from a former Liberal foreign affairs minister. In this Substack post, Lloyd Axworthy attacked Carney and other world leaders for capitulation to the U.S. president. Quote, when do we stop pretending it's all part of some clever negotiating strategy that justifies bootlicking in hopes of tariff concessions? Lloyd Axworthy, thank you for making the time. That term bootlicking, obviously it's a pretty visceral one. What do you think merits that?
I think the fact that it was an opportunity at G7 meetings, NATO meetings, to actually address some serious issues. I mean, the world is changing, we all know that. And rather than coming to the core of these issues, we end up sort of manufacturing mealy-mouthed communiques that say nothing. So issues, what's happening in Ukraine, Gaza, climate change, the whole kind of convulsion that's going on in terms of civilians being attacked around the world. And people expect their institutions to be serious. And what this was done, it was simply a way to try to create a kindergarten so that the child king wouldn't find himself sort of totally estranged.
Well, but I guess the question becomes, if indeed the consensus among the...
Once again, I'm not agreeing with Lloyd Axworthy in terms of where he thinks the Liberal Party should be. I'm agreeing with Lloyd Axworthy in the way he describes Mark Carney. He's right about that.
At that table is don't upset the apple cart. What would you have them do? Because it's true that these topics, be it climate change, be it Ukraine, risk provoking a very powerful and unpredictable man. So what would be a better path to your mind?
Well, I think it should have started earlier. I mean, I think as soon as they had these so-called Sherpa procedures before these conferences, and everybody wants to draft something that tries to find an agreement. But sometimes you simply can't find an agreement. And with Donald Trump, it's impossible unless you play according to his rules and his standards. So I think that the obvious would have been to try to work around him, to simply say, you don't want to talk about roaring fires and intense droughts and starving kids in Africa, well, but we do. And that he leaves early anyway. I mean, he can't take more than 24 hours of dealing with his peers. So, you know, I'm not trying to be sort of sarcastic about it. I'm simply saying we're in such an important defining role right now in the world, and that I think Canadians in particular felt liberated in a way in the election. It was a chance to start thinking how much more independence do we have as opposed to dependence. Mm-hmm. And I think since then, we're finding that we're kind of falling back into the same old rut.
Let's dig into specific examples, because you do talk about some of these things in your post. You criticized Mark Carney for dropping the digital services tax to get the U.S. back to the negotiating table. Now, the Prime Minister said earlier this week this was something Canada was probably going to do anyway in the course of the negotiations. It is a Justin Trudeau-era policy, but yes, one that Mark Carney has moved forward with. Do you think it would have been worth letting these negotiations that are so critical to Canada's economy end over the digital services tax?
Well, Catherine, if it comes to negotiating, you don't give away one of your cards. Mm-hmm. I mean, what do we get in return?
Back to we don't, I should say we don't know. In fact, we don't actually know.
We don't know.
Yeah.
But I think what is happening is that, I mean, I go back to 2018 when Trump introduced aluminum and steel tariffs, and we retaliated. We got back. I mean, we put all kinds of constraints on about $16 billion worth of export. We're the largest export receiving country. We have some real muscle when we want to use it, but there seems to be just this tendency to sort of kind of tug the forelock and say, what can we do in front of this powerful guy? Well, you know, powerful people you can go around them and you can challenge them and you can contain them. I think that's a policy right now, is to contain the damage he does, so that we're not turning on to other generations the destruction that he's causing.
One more minute of this, but Lloyd Axworthy, of course, is as deluded as any liberal, thinking that somehow we can just go with this alone. But you know, Mark Carney, during the election campaign, suggested Canada could go it alone with the help of Europe. Do you think he meant that? Do you think for a minute he was being serious? Of course not. Mark Carney, though, realizes that he doesn't believe his own talking points, but he keeps repeating them because, unfortunately, there were a lot of older age boomers who took him at face value and believed him. And I can tell you this, don't trust politicians. I've been dealing with politicians almost my entire adult life, either as a journalist, as a public affairs officer in the armed forces, or a staffer on Parliament Hill. And I can tell you, a lot of them will lie to your face. And they will do anything to get reelected. Let's watch just a little bit more if you can stand it. I can too.
And so I just want to be crystal clear about this, because I think by and large Canadians, said in the last election, yes, stand up to Donald Trump. But understanding what that looks like, you would be then advocating for, in this instance, no, we're going to stand our ground on digital services tax. We said this is an issue of fairness with U.S. tech giants. If you don't like it, you can take a hike. The negotiations are over. And by the way, here are our steel and aluminum tariffs. And that foregoes the chance of a deal in the next, let's say, 2 weeks.
I mean, putting the experts aside, what is wrong with the country deciding to tax some of the largest gougers of the Canadian finances, destroying our local community newspapers, pushing people out of business, and not tax them for it? I mean, since when? And I think what we've established is that as a precedent. What happens now if next week, all of a sudden, major droughts happen for the States and Donald Trump says, well, I'd like a little part of that water you.
Okay, so the digital services tax was going to restore local media, and the government has a right to extort money because what? They're gouging us? Actually, folks, it's the exact opposite. Canadian media was being helped by US social media. I used to make a lot more money when I was working for a different media outlet by getting my material on Facebook every day because more people read it. And that's what these idiots don't seem to get. Oh, just crush these people because they're somehow stamping down on local news. No, actually, it's the Canadian government stamping down on local news, stamping down on independent news, stamping down on new media because they want censorship. And Lloyd Axworthy and Mark Carney are in complete agreement about this. It's just that Mark Carney realized he couldn't push the digital services tax except at the risk of having the trade talks completely fail.
That sort of big sucking faucet up in north. I mean, you're setting precedents, and you're simply, every time you give in, you're simply providing another kind of incentive. I mean, when you have his press secretary coming up saying the Canadian Prime Minister caved, and it was a triumph for Donald Trump. Do you know who really reacts? And I got a lot of reaction because I took my education in the States. I know a lot of people. They said, "Why did you give that guy another win? We have to stop him."
Now, Lloyd goes on to talk about how he's very upset about NATO getting 5% of each country's GDP and how outrageous that is because we can't spend more money in social programs. And to tell you the truth, right now, I don't think we should be giving NATO any money. We should be getting out of NATO because NATO has become nothing but an obstacle to world peace, especially in Europe. However, folks, I won't get into that one today. I want to look at this comment here from Vic. What angers me, the government awarded Theresa Tam and Bonnie Henry the Order of Canada. And of course, those are the people who probably pushed the COVID narrative, I'll put it that way, the hardest and the strongest. And of course, Theresa Tam especially, I used to watch her news conferences during the height of the COVID pandemic. And she would voice the talking points coming from communist China. And so this woman gets the Order of Canada. And I asked the question that my good friend Kyle Kemper posed the other day on X. I haven't got the slide, but he asked, do you think Don Cherry will ever get the Order of Canada? Even though he really is more representative and emblematic of what is truly Canadian than either of these clowns ever will. And thank you for that comment, Vic. Yeah. I don't doubt they allowed the WHO pandemic to go through so they can blame who. Well, yeah. Anyway. Getting towards the end of the show, I want to show you the story. I'll be right back with, sorry, I gotta navigate out of here. I'll be Thanks for watching today. I'm almost out of power in my laptop here, so I gotta go. I gotta go. This has been a pleasure to bring you some good news for a change. Yes, we're getting exposure on the vaccine injured. Yes, the Liberal Party is suffering the great divide. Yes, we can push back on this government and get some results that are pleasing to people who want justice and freedom in this country. Keep resolving to resist. Keep watching this program. Thank you for the great viewership today. Thank you for the support you've shown today. Please keep it up, and I'll be back again on Sunday with more of the news you need to know. God bless this country. Godspeed to all of you. And this has been David Krayden broadcasting to you live from Ottawa, as I do every day. Bye for now.